On February 12, the Dutch parliament voted yes on a new tax, one that has long been seen as a no-go zone, and a tax that would shake the rules of investing to its core. It is called the Actual Return in Box-Free Act, a flat 36% tax on investment gains, not unrealized ones, meaning when you actually sell, no, on unrealized, on money you have not touched, money that is still sitting in your account. For decades, this was one line no government in Europe would cross. You pay when you sell. That was the deal. The reactions on that law spoke for themselves. Elon Musk sent out this tweet and Shopify CEO Toby Lütke called it, and I quote, "the dumbest thing any government on planet Earth is pursuing right now. And that's saying something." And I started asking myself, is this just one country losing its mind, or could this spread to other nations as well? Well, I did not have to wait long for my answer, because behind the scenes the European Commission had already been working on something big, a massive report on the future of taxes in the whole of the European Union. And I don't think you're gonna like what's in there. But before we open that report, you need to understand what this tax actually does. Not just to the wealthy, but to you, me, and regular small business owners. Let's take a baker in the Netherlands for example. 26 years old, he just opened his own shop, gets up at 4 a.m. every day. Now, like most self-employed workers in the Netherlands, he has no employer pension. The government told him, save for your own retirement. And he listened. Every month, he puts part of his income into an index fund. The idea is simple. His money grows, that money earns more money, and that money earns more money again. Maybe you know what this is called. It's called compound interest. And for a guy like him, that's the most single powerful thing he has. Then, the Actual Return in Box-Free Act passes. And suddenly, every year, the government looks at how much his portfolio grew, on paper, and sends him a bill. 36% of the growth, whether he sold anything or not. Like, he has not seen a single euro from those gains. They are just numbers on the screen, and he is paying real money on them. So, in a good year, let's say his stocks rise about 15k in euros. He then owes 5,400 euros in tax, but does not have that money lying around, because he's already having a hard time keeping his business profitable in the current market conditions. So, what can he do? He starts selling his shares, from his own retirement, to pay a tax on money he never received. And that's not just 5,400 euros gone. The tax cuts into his compounding every single year. On Reddit, I found this really good article of someone calculating what this really means. It's based on a concept called FIRE. It means financial independence, retire early. It's a metric for people who invest to calculate when they could retire. And honestly, I was shocked when I saw the numbers. The new tax system would expand the period you need to work with 6.2 years. And it's not because he saved less, not because he earned less, but because every year the government took a slice before his money could do its work. Now, the Netherlands did not just decide to do this tax. In 2021, the Dutch Supreme Court struck down the old investment tax, ruled it unconstitutional. The system had been taxing people based on what the government assumed they earned, not what they actually earned. And the court said, hey, that's illegal, you cannot do that. So the government tried to fix it. They proposed alternatives, but nothing held. Every year they delayed, the budget lost another 2.3 billion euros. And the only fix that survived legal challenge was taxing actual returns, including unrealized ones. By the way, we made a full video on how that played out, and the link is here. But here is why this matters beyond the Netherlands. The Dutch did not choose this because they wanted to. They chose it because every other option was either unconstitutional, unenforceable, or too expensive to maintain. It goes live in 2028, and when it does, every finance minister in Europe will be watching to see if it works, because they are all staring at the same broken math. And behind the curtain, Brussels was already watching. On April 15th, just 2 months after the Dutch vote, the European Commission quietly published a study. Check out this title: Wealth Taxation, including net wealth, capital and exit taxes. 2 volumes, 420 pages in total. On the official page, the Commission describes it as a study commissioned in 2024 to support an informed debate. It aims to provide a better understanding of wealth taxes and their consequences. That sounds academic. neutral, the kind of thing nobody would read. But this does not read like a study. This reads like a menu. The report covers 5 categories of taxes: net wealth taxes, taxes on unrealized gains, the thing the Netherlands just passed, taxes on realized gains, inheritance and gift taxes, and exit taxes. That's for the people who want to leave the EU. 20 pages on unrealized gains alone. And those pages do not just describe the concept, they built a case for it, from the ground up. Look at the language they use. They did not write "has been debated", they did not write "remains controversial", they wrote "has emerged as a tool". But unrealized gains is just one item on that menu. The report also goes after inheritance. Right now, in 9 EU countries, if you hold shares your entire life and never sell, all the gains you build up disappear the moment you die. Your children inherit the shares, and the tax system acts as if they bought them at today's price. Say you bought shares for 100k in euros. They grew to 1 million. You never paid tax on that 900k in gains. Then you die and the gain is gone, with a death certificate. There is a whole legal structure behind how this works. Different rules in different countries, different thresholds. It does not really matter. The point is, the report puts it plainly. The unrealized capital gains accumulated during the original owner's life are never taxed, and it argues this loophole should be closed. And then there are net wealth taxes. Not taxes on what you earn, taxes on what you own. There is only one EU nation with a net wealth tax right now. That's Spain, where they have a wealth tax and a so-called solidarity wealth tax. Germany also tried a net wealth tax, but had to abandon it after courts ruled it unconstitutional. But the new EU report says the rest of Europe should pay attention. Its words: wealth-related taxes could be intensified to counter wealth inequality and ensure a fair contribution of the very wealthy to public finances. And when you read all of that together, a pattern starts to form. This report does not just present options, it walks through every objection a government might have and takes them apart one by one. Now, you might be thinking, sure, but people cannot pay taxes on money they have not received. The report then points to Dutch data. Only 1% of the taxpayers had liquidity problems. I quote, "Liquidity concerns are real, but possibly manageable through targeted relief mechanisms." And what about the wealthy? Because they can just leave, right? Well, the report says they can more effectively minimize or indefinitely defer taxation, deepening inequality over time. And that a recurrent tax on unrealized gains would restrict many of these strategies. This is not a report about one tax. This is a blueprint. And every finance minister in Europe just got a copy. But here is the question nobody is asking. Why now? Why is the EU publishing a 420-page manual on how to tax wealth at this exact moment? Well, it's because the math is breaking. Let me show you. In Rome, the government owes 137% of everything the country produces in a year. The interest payments alone, not the debt, just the interest, runs over 90 billion euros a year. That's roughly what Italy spends on its entire education system. Every school, every teacher, every university, and just carrying the debt costs the same. That number really stopped me the first time I saw it. And Italy is not even the worst example. France spends more on pensions than any country in the European Union, 14% of GDP, and the system is still running a deficit. Even after raising the retirement age to 64, which by the way put over 1 million people on the streets in protest, the budget is still in deficit. In Spain, there are currently 2.6 workers funding every retiree. That's already below the threshold, but by 2050, that number drops to 1.6. And in Germany, the situation is not much better. 1 in 5 people is over 67 today. By 2035, it will be 1 in 4, a 25% increase in a single decade. And this is where the math turns into a loop. Fewer workers means less tax revenue. Less revenue means more borrowing. More borrowing means higher interest payments. Higher interest costs leave less for pensions, and that pushes more of the burden onto the workers who are left. The same workers who are already shrinking in number. There is no step in this cycle that fixes the one before it. So governments face a choice here. Cut pensions and healthcare, which probably would make it impossible to win elections, print money for which you need clearance from the ECB, or raise income taxes even further, which would dramatically decrease spending power and kill what is left of economic growth. When you cannot tax income any harder without breaking the economy, you go after wealth. Savings, investments, inheritance, property. It is the only money that has not been taxed yet. And that is exactly what this report lays out. Not why they should want to, but how they can. The Netherlands has crossed this line because it ran out of options, and every other country in Europe is looking at the same numbers. Trying to implement these kind of new tax laws would probably give you a lot of political resistance. But the report only mentions it once, on the final page. And its solution? You need to inform voters better. But it does not mention what real backlash looks like. In the Netherlands, they are finding out right now, and it's not subtle. Prince Constantine, brother of the Dutch king and the government's own special envoy for startups, said the following.
Het signaal naar de markt, een signaal naar investeerders in het buitenland en het signaal naar talent wat hier misschien wil komen is, kom maar niet naar Nederland. Nederland is not open for business.
VNO-NCW, the largest business lobby in the country, condemned the tax as a threat to growth. Tax advisory firms reported a sharp rise in immigration inquiries to countries which do not have a tax connection to the Netherlands. The media's reaction was immediate. From the UK's The Telegraph to Australian news outlets to investment blogs. Just check the headlines to taste the sentiment. The backlash was so fierce that Dutch Finance Minister Eelco Heijnen, the man responsible for steering the law through the Senate, publicly admitted that something simply hasn't gone right. But just when everybody thought the act was going back to the drawing board, he declared a few days later, nothing fundamental about the act would change. And with the European Commission's report on his desk, he now has 420 pages of justification to back it up. And he's not the only one. His 26 other EU finance ministers got it too. Now, look, if this were just a report, who cares? Reports get published every week in Brussels. But look at what is happening alongside it. 12 days before the Commission press published, Belgium approved a capital gains tax. 10% on stocks, bonds and crypto. Belgium had never taxed private investment gains before. Decades of nothing. But starting January 1st this year, that changed. And here is the thing nobody's talking about, because all of your finances are already being tracked. Say you open a brokerage account in Amsterdam and you buy a single index fund. Your bank reports that to the Dutch tax authority. The Dutch tax authority reports it to 124 other countries, automatically, every year, without anyone asking. It is called the Common Reporting Standard. And also your savings account statement travels to more countries than most people will visit in their entire life. And it does not stop there. Since last year, crypto gets the same treatment. A new directive called DAC 8. And company ownership records are already linked across every EU member state through a system called Boris. They do not need to build the infrastructure. It is already running. And with the EU's new tax report published and the Netherlands running the test on unrealized capital gains, I would advise you to take notice. But this does not mean this tax is going to be implemented at one big moment. There will not be a single EU directive forcing all 27 countries to do this next year, because that's simply not how the European Union works. One country tries something, Brussels watches, and they write a report. Other countries read that report and then slowly, over 5, 10, 15 years, what started as one country's solution to a problem just becomes the way everyone does it. That is not a theory, that is a pattern, and it's already playing out. And we mentioned it before, but there is one part in this whole report that is even more debatable than the one on unrealized gains. It's the one that could keep you where you are while you actually want to leave. The exit tax. And we are making a video on that right now. Subscribe so you won't miss it.